Okay, so today I want to talk about something I predicted a long time ago, and this week, right in front of our eyes, it started to happen. I predicted that China would not invade Taiwan. I predicted that China does not need to invade Taiwan because China is going to get Taiwan without firing a single shot through a quiet deal between Washington and Beijing where America agrees to give up Taiwan and China agrees to stay out of the Iran war. I said this before the war started. I said it when people were laughing at me, and now this week Trump flew to Beijing. He sat with Xi Jinping for 2 days, and when he came back, he called Taiwan a negotiating chip. A negotiating chip. That is not a mistake. That is not a slip of the tongue. That is a signal, and if you understand how these deals actually work, not how they are announced publicly, but how they are structured quietly behind closed doors, then you understand that what happened in Beijing this week is the beginning of the end of Taiwan's independence. Taiwan was sold in Beijing. Nobody announced it, but it happened. Okay, so let me walk you through this carefully because I want you to understand not just what happened, but why it was always going to happen this way, why this was the only logical outcome given the structure of the situation. First, let me explain my original prediction because I think it is important to understand the reasoning before we look at the evidence. Most people, Western analysts, American politicians, military experts, they look at Taiwan and they think the question is this: will China invade Taiwan militarily? And they spend all their time analyzing Chinese military capabilities, American carrier groups, missile ranges, landing craft numbers, and they debate, can China take Taiwan by force? Can America defend Taiwan by force? I said you're asking the wrong question entirely. The right question is this: does China even need to invade Taiwan? And the answer is no. China does not need to invade Taiwan because there is a much cheaper, much faster, and much more effective way for China to get Taiwan, and that way is a grand bargain with America. Here is the logic. China does not have a strong warrior culture the way Iran does, or Russia does, or even Japan does. I have said this many times. China is a consumer culture. The Chinese elite send their money overseas. They send their children overseas. They are not willing to sacrifice millions of soldiers in a land invasion of Taiwan that would destroy the global economy and possibly trigger a nuclear war. The cost-benefit analysis does not work for China on a military invasion, but a political deal, a quiet framework agreement that costs China nothing and gives China everything. So what does China have to offer America in return? What does China have that America desperately needs right now? Two things. First, China has leverage over Iran. China is Iran's biggest oil buyer. China is Iran's economic lifeline. If China tells Iran, open the Strait of Hormuz, stop hitting American bases, come to the table, Iran has to listen because without China buying its oil, Iran's economy collapses. China has more influence over Iran than anyone else on the planet. Second, China has rare earth minerals. These are the materials that go into every advanced weapon system America makes, every missile, every fighter jet, every semiconductor chip, every piece of AI infrastructure. China controls approximately 60% of the world's rare earth supply and over 85% of the world's rare earth processing capacity. If China cuts off rare earths, America cannot build weapons. America cannot build chips. The entire military-industrial complex stops. So this is the deal on the table. America is stuck in a war with Iran it cannot win quickly. America needs China's help to get out. China says, fine, we will help you, but the price is Taiwan. Not publicly, not formally, not with a press conference and a signing ceremony, but quietly through frameworks, through language, through what is said and what is carefully not said. And this week in Beijing, the price was paid. Okay, now let me show you exactly how I know this, because I want you to look at the specific evidence, not what the media is reporting, the specific words, the specific signals. Signal 1. Trump called the $14 billion arms package for Taiwan, which was already approved by Congress in January, a very good negotiating chip. His exact words: a chip, not a commitment, not a legal obligation, a chip, something you trade, something you give away in exchange for something else. This is the first time in the history of the Taiwan Relations Act that an American president has publicly described armed sales to Taiwan as a bargaining piece. That is historic and that is deliberate. Signal 2. Trump said, I haven't approved it yet. We're going to see what happens. That package has been waiting on his desk for months. He flew to Beijing, he sat with Xi for 2 days, he talked about Taiwan the whole night, his words, and he came back saying, we'll see. The message to Taiwan is unmistakable. Your weapons, the weapons you need to defend yourself, are conditional on what China gives us. Signal 3. Trump said, when I'm not here, I think they might, meaning China might attack Taiwan after he leaves office. Think about what he is saying. He is publicly confirming that China's window of opportunity is the post-Trump period. He is essentially telling China, you have a window. I won't stop you after I'm gone. That is not the language of Taiwan's protector. That is the language of someone who has already decided to step back. Signal 4. Trump told Taiwan directly Taiwan would be very smart to cool it a little bit. Cool it. He is telling Taiwan to reduce its assertiveness, to stop making trouble. This is the classic language that great powers use towards smaller allies right before they abandon them. They do not say we are abandoning you. They say you should be more careful, you should cool it, you should not provoke. Signal 5, and this is the most important structural signal of all. Xi Jinping announced at the summit that America and China had agreed to build a constructive China-US relationship of strategic stability and that this framework would guide the relationship for the next 3 years and beyond. Now, what does strategic stability mean in this context? It means that any American action on Taiwan, any arms sale, any diplomatic upgrade, any military deployment can now be framed by Beijing as a violation of the stability framework that Trump personally agreed to. China just locked America into a framework it controls, and the price of that framework, the implicit condition, is Taiwan. Now let me connect this to the broader strategic picture because I want you to understand why this deal makes complete logical sense for both sides. For America, the Iran war is a disaster. The interceptors are running low. The economy is being disrupted. Oil prices are threatening to spike. Political support at home is collapsing. Only 40% of Americans support the war. Trump needs an exit, but he cannot exit on Iran's terms. That would look like surrender. He needs China to give him an off-ramp. He needs China to pressure Iran to make a deal that Trump can call a victor. China can give him that. China has the leverage over Iran that America does not have, and in exchange for that exit ramp, Trump quietly signals that Taiwan is negotiable. For China, this is the smartest possible move. Think about it from Beijing's perspective. China does not need to fire a single shot. It does not need to risk its economy in a military invasion. It does not need to trigger American military intervention. It simply needs to let America exhaust itself in Iran, which is already happening, and then offer America a way out. And the price of that exit is Taiwan. This is exactly what I predicted, and this is exactly the deal that is being structured right now. Now, I want to use a historical pattern to show you why this always ends the same way because this is predictive history and the pattern is very consistent. Think about the Munich Agreement of 1938. Britain and France needed to avoid a war with Hitler. They were not ready. Their militaries were weak. Their populations did not want war, so they made a deal. They gave Hitler the Sudetenland, part of Czechoslovakia. They called it peace in our time. Czechoslovakia was not in the room. Czechoslovakia was not consulted. 6 months later, Hitler took the rest of Czechoslovakia, and a year after that, the war they were trying to avoid started anyway. The pattern of appeasement is always the same. A great power under pressure makes a quiet concession to a regional power it fears. It tells itself this is just one concession. This will buy stability. This will prevent a bigger conflict. And what it actually does is tell the regional power you can take more because we will give you more rather than fight. I am not saying China is Hitler. That is not my argument. My argument is structural. The pattern of a weakening great power quietly trading away a smaller ally's security for a short-term benefit, that pattern always ends the same way. The smaller ally is eventually absorbed, and the stability that was purchased is always temporary. Now apply this to Taiwan today. America is a weakening empire. It is stuck in a war it cannot win cleanly. It desperately needs Chinese cooperation, and it is quietly signaling Taiwan is negotiable. We will not die for Taiwan. We will trade it for an exit from Iran, and access to rare earths, and a trade deal and Boeing jets. And China, patient, strategic, methodical, is accepting this signal. Not loudly, not with triumphant announcements, quietly through frameworks, through language, through the architecture of a deal that was never formally announced. Now let me address what China gave in return because deals have two sides. Trump announced China will buy 200 Boeing jets. China has not confirmed this. Trump said China will buy American oil. China has not confirmed this. Trump said China will help with Iran negotiations. China's foreign minister said we encourage dialogue. That is not help. That is a press release. But here is what actually happened that was real and immediate. America approved roughly 10 Chinese technology companies to buy NVIDIA's H200 chips, advanced AI chips that were previously blocked. The CEO of NVIDIA was on Air Force One flying to Beijing. That happened. That is real. That is America giving China access to the technology it needs to build AI dominance in exchange for the framework agreements around Taiwan and Iran. So the deal as I see it structurally looks like this. China gets the Taiwan framework. China gets advanced AI chip access. China gets a 3-year stability agreement on its own terms. America gets a promise of Boeing jets that may or may not materialize. America gets vague language about Iran that commits China to nothing. America gets a Xi visit to Washington in September to keep the optics looking good. America got promises. China got structure. And in geopolitics, structure always beats promises. Now let me address the counter-argument directly because I know what people are saying. They are saying nothing legally changed. The One China policy is the same. The Taiwan Relations Act is still the law. Officials say Taiwan policy is unchanged. And yes, nothing legally changed. That is true. But here is the lesson of history that I want you to really understand. Legal change always comes last. Behavioral change comes first. The legal reality follows the strategic reality, sometimes years later, sometimes decades later, but it follows. China did not legally change Hong Kong's status overnight. It changed it gradually through behavioral adjustments, through quiet pressure, through the slow erosion of commitments that existed on paper but were not enforced in practice. And one day people woke up and Hong Kong was gone, not because the law was passed, but because the reality on the ground had shifted so far that the law was irrelevant. The same process is beginning for Taiwan. Not with a law, not with an announcement, but with a framework, with a chip, with cool it a little bit, with 9,500 miles away, with we'll see what happens. The strategic reality is shifting. The legal reality will catch up, or it will not need to catch up, because the reality will simply become the new normal. Okay, so let me give you my complete analysis and my prediction going forward. I predicted this deal before the war started. I said China will not invade Taiwan. China will get Taiwan through a grand bargain. America agrees to give up Taiwan. China agrees not to help Iran. This week in Beijing, that bargain began to take shape. Not completely, not finally, but the structure is being set. The framework is being locked in. The signals have been sent. What happens next? I believe this will unfold slowly over the next 3 years, which is exactly the time frame of the strategic stability framework Xi announced. Over those 3 years, America will gradually reduce arms sales to Taiwan. America will gradually reduce its diplomatic engagement with Taiwan. America will gradually shift its language from "we support Taiwan's defense" to "we want peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait." And China will gradually increase its political pressure on Taiwan, its economic isolation, its military presence around the island. Not an invasion, a slow squeeze until Taiwan has no choice but to accept whatever terms Beijing offers. This is the deal that was made in Beijing. Nobody announced it. No press release confirmed it. Taiwan was not in the room. But the transaction has begun, and history, which I study very carefully, tells me that once this transaction begins, it is very rarely reversed. China does not need to conquer Taiwan. America will hand it over piece by piece, framework by framework, chip by chip. Okay, that is my analysis for today. This is not prophecy. This is structural analysis built on game theory and the historical patterns of how empires manage their decline. Question everything I have said. Look at the evidence yourself. Think critically. But if this framework is correct, and I believe it is, then what happened in Beijing this week will be understood by future historians as the moment when the Taiwan question stopped being a military question and became a political transaction, a transaction that was completed quietly without fanfare, without announcement, in the Great Hall of the People over 2 days with an honor guard, some children waving flags, and the state banquet. Okay,